Okay, so at this juncture, we have successfully created a single taco card. We can see it on the right-hand side. So of course, our next step is duplicating or replicating this design, this component, if you will, so we can see what multiple cards will look like side by side. So the first thing I want to do is on our most outer div right here, I'm going to add one more class, and it's going to be gap-x-4. That's going to apply the column gap CSS attribute. And if you are unfamiliar with this, what it does is it creates some automatic spacing between flex children so that you don't need to manually put margin between them. It will automatically add, in this case, 16 pixels on the x-axis, which means left and right of each eventual flex child. So we no longer need to provide margin to separate them. So when I save this, we should see no difference. That CSS class will move over here to the right. But now what we can do is target this taco card, which is this internal div right here. And of course, what I want to do is just copy it and paste it a couple times below so we can see these taco cards rendered side by side. So I'm just going to copy this and paste this div below, and then paste it one more time, save it, and now we have 3 taco cards right next to each other. So this is exactly what the official Taco Bell menu looks like. Of course, each taco is different, and each food item and food name is different. Right now, all of ours are exactly the same, but this is moving us in the right direction. With that said, even though we have that duplication, we can already start to get the sense that there is a component hiding in front of us because we're starting to see the similarity between these cards. This div that we have right here is something that would be represented well as a separate React component because it is logic that is obviously going to be duplicated, and we can now see is visually duplicated. In order to create all of these 3 cards, we had to copy and paste the exact same div with all of the Tailwind classes with the same semantic structure of having an image, then an anchor tag, and a button. So the UI is already kind of suggesting to us that there is a component lurking in here. We are, of course, welcome in React to simply copy and paste like we're doing here, but that doesn't really fit the spirit of the library. So what I want to do in this lesson is extract this div to its own new component, which I will call TacoCard. So let me expand my VS Code editor. And what I'm going to do is go to my File Explorer, and in my source directory, I'm going to create a new file called TacoCard.jsx. So with Create React App, you can actually name your files with either a .js or .jsx extension. Either one is fine for your component files. In this case, I'm going to go with JSX, but as you can see, our app component is within a regular .js file, and you can see there is no problem. I generally prefer JSX just because it creates some degree of distinction between a component file versus perhaps a regular JavaScript file with something like utility functions, but there's different preferences among different developers. All right, so here is my new empty file, and I'm just going to bring it over here to the right-hand side. And so, of course, what we're going to do in this file is define our new component. I'm going to declare it as an arrow function, functional component. So const TacoCard is going to be an arrow function that returns some JSX. Here's my body. Here's my return keyword. Here is my opening and closing parentheses. And what I'm going to copy, of course, is just one of those 3 sample divs representing one TacoCard. I'm going to paste it in here. Let Prettier do its magic. There we go. Before I forget, I want to make sure I export default this TacoCard component. So it will be the default export of my file, and we can then import this component into whatever other file we want. We did practice creating multiple components earlier in the course, but the general best practice within the React ecosystem is 1 component per file. We did not follow that paradigm earlier. We're going to follow it in this section since we're building something closer to a real-world app. So whenever you have a component like TacoCard, it's generally a good idea to put it in its own separate component file. Sometimes people play a little bit loose with that rule. For example, if your component has only 2 lines or 3 lines, they may put it within the same file as a larger component that is utilizing that smaller component. But in this case, TacoCard is distinct and kind of individual enough to me as a key building block that I do want to extract it into its own component. Now, we still have the same problem we talked about at the beginning of the lesson, and that is there is no dynamic nature within this component. We are still hard coding the exact same taco name, and right here we're still referencing the same taco image, which by the way, we have to import into this file for now so that this reference is valid. So before I forget, let me scroll up and copy this JPEG import to the top of this file. But the problem remains the same. We are always rendering a crunchy taco supreme within our TacoCard rather than having a dynamic component where we can vary or adjust some small sections of it while still keeping the intrinsic look and feel of a TacoCard, right? We obviously want to be able to alter the image and the title of this TacoCard, but the rest of the logic can stay the same. The CSS styles and the add to order button at the bottom, for example. And we'll talk about how we can add that kind of dynamic content to a component in the upcoming lessons. But for now, we have our new TacoCard component. So now we can render it 3 times within our app component. So that spares us the need, of course, to copy and paste those 3 divs manually. So right here in app.js, I'm going to import our new TacoCard component. So import TacoCard, and that is going to come from the exact same directory, and then TacoCard. You do not need to provide the JSX extension because Create React App will automatically recognize it. And right here, what I'm going to do is just remove all of our nested code. Make sure that you keep the most outer div, but otherwise the nested inner divs that represent the TacoCards can be removed like so. So here we are back to just a single outer div. And here, of course, I'm going to render a TacoCard component 3 times. So I'm going to use the self-closing syntax. So open the bracket, TacoCard, then the closing bracket, and then a / before that. And I'm going to copy and paste this 3 times below. And since our image is located now in our TacoCard component on the right, we no longer need this import right here. And there we go. So we have significantly simplified our app component, and now it just is rendering 3 TacoCards within a div. So I'm going to close this file on the right and then show you my browser. And you can see everything remains the same. Our app looks exactly as it did, but we've obviously isolated the TacoCard logic to its own separate component, which is more in the spirit of what React wants you to do. All right, so moving right along, we now have a couple cards, and obviously the next step for us is going to talk about how we can inject dynamic content into each one of those TacoCard components. So I will see you in the upcoming lessons.